So if you read the blog post, you know that the Galeshot, it is kind of an archer spec. You're going to get access to this new weapon called the Cyclone Bow. I think talk about design goals. Part of Ranger's identity is definitely being a bow user with marksmanship. I think a lot of people, when they first start playing the game, some people like to gravitate towards the archer characters, and so Ranger is kind of that for them. But then when they got to elite specs, there wasn't really one that elevated that fantasy. So that's what the Galeshot's trying to do, is kind of be that signpost spec for if you really like playing archers in games. There's a lot of archers in our game, but Galeshot is like the one that's highly focused on that fantasy. So, part of the Tyrian Alliance, the Tengu are teaching Rangers how to control wind magic and be even better with their bow. So you're going to see a lot of mix of like the archery, the wind magic, and some bird aesthetics, because that's always fun. So that's kind of like the initial idea and why we decided to go with the Galeshot. So now we're in game, we can talk about what it is. I think when you first look at the UI, you can see a new F5 skill where you go into the bow and see you have these feathers that are your arrows. These are kind of going to be your resource for the spec. Continuing with the UI, when Cal will use the skill, you see it takes an arrow and you have a meter where you can see the time until your next arrow. So you're not guessing, you have the recharge there. And another thing you can notice is that Cal doesn't have no recharge on, but the bow doesn't have a recharge. The bow is something that you can always have the option to go into. This is something that we felt was important with the Archer Fantasy, is the ability to always have something to do at range. So the auto attack also doesn't cost any of the arrows. So wherever you are, you're able to auto attack with the bow. Obviously, this is very strong competitive mode. It's going to keep that number probably low, but in like instance PvE fights, if the boss jumps away, you always have the option to swap to your bow. And that's something that's just one thing that spec brings that's kind of different from if we just made, a normal weapon that's gated by weapon swap, is that, you could have a longbow, but even there are times where you swap to your other weapon set that you don't have anything to do at range, so that's kind of a gap that the spec is hoping to fill.
It's okay, because you should just swap to your short bow from your long bow, and then make sure you have bear pets as well. That's the key.
And then, so going on to kind of like the mechanics of the bow is that as you see Cal use skills, he'll get this buff on his bar that's called Wind Force. Wind Force is kind of, you build stacks of it up to your payoff. If you hit 5 Wind Force, you'll unlock what we call the finale skill Hawkeye. That's intended to do a lot of damage and hope for you to cycle through your skills. It plays a lot like a kit, and we've seen through a lot of gameplay, especially like Engineer and sometimes Firebrand with these like no cooldown abilities, is that the optimal playstyle is to go and press the good button then leave. We wanted the Cyclone Bow to have more interactive play than that, so that's what Hawkeye is intended for. You want to like wait for your cooldowns, wait to have enough arrows to go into this kit to get that big payoff, but you always have the option to go into the kit if you need to use that evade backwards, or you just want to auto attack some. Maybe you have enough arrows that you can do a few blusters before you go back to your weapon. So it's trying to aiming to be fluid and always have options to support this ranged play style no matter what's happening around you.
All right.
So
talk through the skills.
Talk about the actual skills.
What is Bluster that you just mentioned?
Bluster is the 2 skill. This is kind of your bread and butter skill. Has a really low cooldown, costs 1 arrow, so you're going to be weaving it in a lot. Just quick charge up, then quick burst. Pretty simple. Nothing too crazy about it. Then we go to the 3 skill. This is going to be Fleeting Zephyr, your defensive. Wanted to make sure the weapon has at least like 1 defensive in its kit. So you're going to do a leap back and evade. That's always useful. But you're also going to release a gust of wind, and that wind is going to be a pretty big projectile destruction. Part of being good at range is being able to trade in range. So if there's another person that's shooting at you with a projectile, you have the ability to use that to stop a pretty big important like incoming attack, and also use it to protect your allies if you see a lot of projectiles incoming. The next skill is going to be Quarry's Peril. This is going to be a ground target. You shoot arrows up, and then after a delay, they rain down, and it's going to immobilize people. It's going to do some okay damage, but hoping the immobilize is the main aspect to kind of lead into your other skills. You can Quarry's Peril, then hit them with a Bluster, or when we get into the 5 skill, also use that, and just some ranged poke that is not affected by projectile denial, because that's like a big part of Worldly World that we know, so we want to make sure that you have ways to interact that aren't just through normal projectiles. And then we can get on to the 5 skill, which is like kind of another capstone skill. Supersonic Arrow. It's going to be very strong. It's going to take a lot of arrows, but hopefully worth the payoff. You're going to stand still and channel and then shoot a really fast arrow. I think I set this projectile to some insane number. It's almost instant, basically. It's going to do pretty heavy damage, CC, unblockable pierce. It's a very good skill and one that if you're fighting a Galeshot, you want to definitely see coming and evade. This is also something that you can line up with Quarry's Peril and then use the supersonic arrow. And part of the payoff for being such a high arrow cost is that it's also going to give you 2 of those wind force. So you can get to your Hawkeye even faster if you choose to use it. Then, just talk about Hawkeye. It's, intended to be a pretty high damaging skill to pay off for using all these weapons or all these skills while you're in the kit. And its functionality is basically you're going to use it on a target, it's going to lock onto that target, and then shoot 5 arrows at them, and then it's going to look at if there's any nearby enemies to them and shoot 3 arrows to them. So it's potentially a lot of arrows if you have a lot of people near them, and kind of like a cleave arrow ability. That's kind of like the core gameplay loop. Go in, use your arrows, come out, and as we talked about in the blog post, mobility and swiftness, being mobile and controlling the battlefield is also part of the spec, and that's going to come through more of the utilities. So we can get into those. The utilities are going to be squalls, which are basically small bursts of wind magic that are kind of like cantrips, but cantrips already exist in Ranger, so these are windy, small wind magic effects. The heal going to be pretty simple. You're going to heal yourself and give yourself super speed and cleanse some conditions. It's a very basic, heal, but does what you want. There'll be a couple super speed tie-ins when we get into the traits, so that's pretty good, but it's just, good value, what you want from your heal. We probably have seen this, but I want to make sure people know that there's no weapon restriction on Galeshot. The F3 is just like an addition, so you're going to have 2 weapons normally, plus the bow. There's no locking your skills. So now, just wanted to make sure, because I saw some confusion over that. So then we can go into the more utilities. There's kind of like 2 offensive ones, 2 defensive ones. We can talk about the offensive ones first. The first one is Piercing Gales. It's going to be pretty simple, just damaging abilities that you want to fit into like a rotation in PvE or use for additional poke. You're going to shoot 5 projectiles that pierce, kind of like in a pattern to make an X formation that I think looks pretty cool. And as it says, it's going to pierce. These projectiles inflict vulnerability, and then its baseline going to get additional damage increase from vulnerability. So if someone has 10 stacks, you're going to get the 10% bonus from vulnerability, but also deal an additional 20% damage. And then another tweak to the skill is that it's going to fly faster, the arrow or the wind magic projectiles, if you yourself have swiftness or super speed. So it's kind of trading with someone if they know the timing for it, and kind of throw in a bit of a tweak, give yourself some swiftness, and the projectiles will come at them a bit faster, so they have to react differently. And then the second utility that's going to be offensive is called Mistral. This skill is intended to be a payoff for having a lot of projectiles, using things like longbow, using like Axe 2. You're going to create a screen of freezing wind, and then as you shoot projectiles through the screen, they'll get frozen, which will chill the enemy they hit and deal additional damage. So this has the potential to do a lot of additional procs of that damage and chill, has the potential to do not that many, so you really need to plan around when you're going to use the screen. Put it up right before you're on a Hawkeye, use the Piercing Gales through it. If you rapid fire it, it's going to be, plus 10 extra procs. So this is a way to encourage, some more bow usage in the elite specialization outside of like just having the normal Cyclone bow.
Also works with any projectile skill, right? I can use my axe and throw some axes through it.
Yep. Then we can move on to the defensive utilities. The first one is going to be Wind Shear. This is just a quick knockback around you, a swell of wind. It's going to, like I said, knock back enemies, stun break you, and then it has a very short projectile reflex. So if you see a pretty important one coming, again, having that, edge over range trades, you can reflect that back at people. Then the last skill is going to be Whirlwind. This is going to be a completely mobility-focused skill. It's ground targeted. You're going to leap through a whirlwind, evading while you're leaping, and then grant yourself a burst of super speed. This is going to be important. If you're a long-range character, you want to position yourself well in fights, so this is going to be an important tool for that. Just quick burst movement speed, sort of aid, get yourself where you need to be to be in the best position in fights. And then we can get on to the elite skill, Perfect Storm. You're going to charge up, throw a tornado in a direction, and then where that tornado lands, it'll grow larger and kind of deal ticking damage for while it's there. So it's a DPS skill. And then when you throw the tornado, it'll launch people along with it. And kind of the special part about this skill is that the launch is variable. It will launch them towards where you target the tornado to land. So you can target it right in front of you, and if you launch an enemy, they'll launch just in place right in front of you. But if you target it all the way out, the tornado will kind of carry them with you and go a really long launch, and then the end goal is that they'll always end where the tornado ends, so you can get that taking damage on them. Alright, so then we can move on to the traits.
Alright, traits.
Yep. Right, starting with the minors. The first one, just as always, just explains the spec, the teaching of the Tango. You can see there that arrows have a 5-second recharge time to start. Obviously, things can be tweaked like that. It has a tooltip for Hawkeye. Then we can move on to the Master Miner, Bird of Prey. Strike damage is increased while you have Swiftness or Super Speed, and Swiftness is more effective. So this is an ore, so if you have Swiftness or Super Speed, it doesn't stack, but you're just going to get a damage bonus for the things, like using the heal, get the Super Speed, some Swiftness procs, and the trait line, and just making yourself faster in general, as a spec wants to do. And then we can go to the Grandmaster Miner, Jetstream. It's just going to give you a base movement speed increase. We see a lot. Just even if you don't have Swiftness or Super Speed, going to move faster. And then Hawkeye will grant you Super Speed. Sometimes you need to commit a lot to get that Hawkeye bonus, so this is going to make sure you get that Bird of Prey when you're using it, and also just a burst of movement speed to reposition after having to invest into it. We can move on to the Adept here. The first one is going to be Joy of Movement. This is just simple bonus onto your Squalls. When you use them, you'll remove a movement pairing conditions. Those can be pretty deadly, especially the spec when you get chilled, immobilized, pretty vulnerable. So you have this trait so that when you use your Whirlwind, it'll move immobilized so you can still get out, or just make sure you're staying on your feet with this trait. Then the next one is going to be Feel the Rush, which causes movement skills to grant you swiftness and endurance. Movement skills, really good with this elite spec. Sword, great sword, they're not ranged, but they have good gap creators, gap closers. So using this, you're going to feel the wind as you rush through it. It's going to give you some swiftness to stay up with mobility, and also a bit of endurance to keep you defensive if you're using those movement skills to stay in like melee range, for example. Then last we have Wuthering Wind. It's going to add an additional proc to when you bluster your pet's next attack. It's going to create just small damaging swell around the target. So it's just additional damage on the bluster. It is AoE damage, give it a bit better cleave, and have some interactions with your pet. Bluster has a couple other interactions in the spec, so this trait has a potential to proc a decent amount, and it's just some additional damage if you want that from this tier. We can move to the Master tier. And the first one, we have Flock Together. This is the one we talked about in the blog post. Avian pets have increased strike damage and health, and beast skills grant quickness around the ranger. This is a pet trait like you see we've been adding to the core traits. This was actually the first pet trait. We really wanted birds to have a tie-in with this spec. It was very thematic, with the wind and the Tengu and all. And so we created this idea, and we were also be like, wait, this is cool for all the pets. So we kind of reverse added them to the core lines, but this one was actually the real one. So it's going to, again, make your birds. It affects Phoenix, it affects Moas, just, things with feathers. It's going to make them deal increased damage and also grant quickness around the ranger. Along with another Grandmaster trait, we're going to try and have the spec do a quick DPS in PvE as an additional role as to just normal DPS. So probably want this trait to make it easier. But we can go on to, the next Master tier. It's going to be Perilous Skies. This is going to cause Quarry's Peril. That was the 4 skill in your Cyclone Bow to be replaced by Pelt. Pelt is pretty similar to Quarry's Peril, except couple key differences. It's going to get 2 ammo, so you're going to be able to use it more. It's only going to cost 1 arrow, but it's going to eschew that immobilization. So basically, you can get more damage out of this slot, better poke, and like situations for World v World, but you're going to lose that powerful immobilize. So it's kind of a trade how you want that skill to be used. More uses, which means faster Hawkeyes as well. And again, Corey's Peril will have additional bonus, so this trait will get better. Let's talk about one of the Grandmaster traits. And the last master trait, last master trait is going to be fetch. This is going to be just value off pet swap. Pet swaps can be interesting traits for a burst of, like just a burst effect. It's going to give you 2 arrows back. Arrows normally have 5 seconds, so you have to wait a bit of time to get a full combo back, but you can take this trait if you want to speed that up a bit. Catch people off guard if you just need some arrows to like use the lead back or something. Pretty simple. Then we can get into the Grandmasters. And these are all, the theme of the Grandmasters is they're all going to tweak how you play the bow, what its exact gameplay loop looks like. You can start with the middle again. Go for Gale Force. Gale Force is going to augment your Wind Force stacks, which were the things that you built up so you can get Hawkeye. It's going to give them a small movement speed and damage increase bonus. And then when you use Hawkeye, it's going to convert these Wind Forces into a stronger bonus for a short period of time. So the goal here is that you kind of have a normal gameplay loop with your Cyclone Bow, and then after you finish it, you're going to get almost a Sikkim type bonus to go into like a weapon skill type burst. So you use this, and then you go do your Whirling Defense, go do like a Rapid Fire. It's just carrying that moment of power farther into your normal weapon skills. Then we can go to the top one. This is going to be Cloudburst, kind of where I was talking about some synergies between it and the other skills. Corey's Peril and Supersonic Arrow, those are going to be the 4 and 5 skills, are going to reset the cooldown of Bluster. And then when you use Bluster or Hawkeye, you're going to give boons to nearby allies. These are quickness in PvE, it's swiftness and fury in the competitive modes. But basically, we want the value for there to be on the cooldown of Bluster. But it's going to change kind of the cadence. Where you use 2, then you use 4, 2 again, 5, 2. Kind of get a lot faster of a Hawkeye going. You don't have to wait for cooldowns longer, so it's going to kind of condense it. And then also be the option where you're supporting your allies. This will also work off the Perilous Skies. You're going to get 2 pelts, which is 2 recharges for your blusters, which procs Wuthering Winds. So going like diagonally, got a lot of synergy in the line. Then we move on to the final Grandmaster trait. It's going to be Shrike. The goal with Shrike is it's just for people that want to stay in the bow as long as possible. It's going to trigger off of missile hits, and missiles are just like projectiles, from your bow, from your axes, what have you, things that fly through. Every time you hit someone, every 8 hits with a missile, you're going to shoot a volley of arrows, and also reach, store an arrow. It's basically as you're auto-attacking the bow, or you can swap to like a longbow, get a rapid fire. The whole goal here is that you have a lot of arrows so you can stay in the bow as long as possible for people that want to do that.
I recommend leading the wind.
Yeah, I think little bonus. When you're using your pet Cal, does it feel a bit more responsive to you? Almost.
It kind of does.
Almost like when you tell it to use an F2, it will do it immediately. Part of this spec and making sure things like flock together birds have long cast times. So has been a bit of an issue that for a while pet responsiveness wasn't great. You weren't able to interrupt their commands. We made sure that we went and fixed pet AI, that when you use a skill, your pet will obey you. So this applies to all ranger specs, untamed, druid, what have you. When you use an F2, your white tiger will give you Aegis when you want it to. So we want to make sure that when the spec comes out and you're using those birds, they feel responsive like you would want them to.
There is some strange behavior when you are cheating and have no recharges, but I don't expect that anyone will run into that.
That covers it with the Galeshot if you want to hop over tooltip to get it.
The final tooltip pass. Yeah, so that's all of the elite specs we have for today. We'll probably be back next week with a few more, but you'll just have to stay tuned to learn what those are.
Yep. When the beta comes out, we're going to be looking for all the feedback you guys put out. We're going to have forum threads for each specialization as normal, looking at other avenues as well, other social medias, going to read all you guys say. The beta is for the feedback, what you guys like, what you guys don't like, number tuning, of course, the art, the audio, everything. So, we're just as excited as you guys are for you guys to get your hands on these things.
Yeah, and I guess we can just reiterate once again, because it's true that obviously things are going to be a little bit unbalanced, most likely. There's going to be things that need improvement, mechanics that are maybe a little crazier than they need to be and need to be kind of reined back in or changed. We've definitely seen, even with like some of the past non-elite spec betas, where we've been able to make some pretty significant changes to things based off player feedback, based off the results of betas, where some things just aren't going to work, and it's not what we're going for, but it's not something that is really a surprise. Like we're going to be trying some cool stuff, and some of it's going to need to be adjusted between beta and launch, and that is entirely kind of what we're expecting to do already.
Saw someone ask this. The Galeshot bow will be available underwater. We actually have a harpoon gun version of it. Wanted to make sure all these spec mechanics will be available underwater, so you can play them wherever. So that shouldn't be a worry.
The Cyclone harpoon gun.
The Cyclone harpoon, maybe the water spout harpoon gun. I don't. It's available underwater and it looks.
It
cool,
works.
So
It looks cool. All right. We're almost done. Any final words, Sailor? Read Ghosts of Ascalon.
Read Ghosts of Ascalon. I think any PvP, the push beta is coming out soon. We'll probably reiterate that after the next stream, but keep your eyes out for that.
Yep, and of course keep your eyes out for additional elite spec information. Next week's going to be a pretty similar pattern where we're going to have that initial kind of reveal video and developer blog post, and then we'll be back with another live stream where we show off the next heavy armor profession, medium armor profession, and light armor profession.